It's time for Mornings at 8 with Jonathan Mark on AM 1480 WLEA.
Oh, yes, indeed. And here we are on a Tuesday morning. It's Tuesday. So yesterday being a holiday, a day off for a lot of people, I guess most of us kind of took a detour around Monday, and here we are. It's Tuesday. So the hardest day of the week, Monday, is done. It's behind us. So it's Tuesday. Not bad. And boy, normally I say it's at least it's not Monday, but yesterday was such a good day. It was a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous day. I mean, whatever you wanted to do, however you wanted to spend your holiday, it was ideal weather for it, whatever. My wife and I, the way we spent our holiday was working in the yard. So that's how we spent our holiday. I mowed the lawn, and she did some planting and weeding. And it was all in all a pretty good day. And speaking of weeding and flowers and all that, I noticed this last week, and I guess I should have said something, but no, I didn't. It slipped my mind. The phlox are out. Phlox is out. Is it? Is phlox singular or plural? Is it like deer, like one deer or many deer? Or is it one phlox and many phloxes? Or phloxi? I don't know.
That is the question.
I know. Things like that really worry me. I mean, I'll wake up at midnight going, is it phlox or phloxes? Darn, I really don't know. Anyway, I did notice last week that the phlox are out. I'm going to say are and be done with it. And not being a botanist or anything like that, doesn't phlox normally appear in June? I think. And it was out. Or they were out last week. So I should have mentioned something and I didn't, but boy, are they out this. It's gorgeous. A little white or purple type flower or something. And in that stretch between the village of Almond and the intersection of 66 and 21 in that little alley, phlox are it's just beautiful. And here on Ashby Hill too, as a matter of fact. So the phlox is early this year, I think. And we had a late spring. Spring had a hard time getting started. It was kind of going back and forth between late winter and early spring for a number of weeks. So spring started late, but the phlox is out early. Now, what could that mean? Is it sinister? I have no idea. Global warming? Who knows? Man-made climate change? I don't know. But spring was late in coming and phlox is out early. So there we go. Now, I was trying to think of a theme for this morning's show, and I'm thinking, what kind of a theme can I use? And then I figured, probably not. So this will be a sort of a carefully crafted mishmash of totally unrelated news items. And number one, you're probably drinking a cup of coffee, or if you're not, you probably were not too awfully long ago. And this is from Mental Floss. It says, bad news. The best time of the day to drink coffee isn't as soon as you wake up. How do you like that? It says, if you depend on coffee to help get you through the day, you can rest assured that you're not the world's only caffeine fiend. Why they call it fiend, I don't know. But anyway, far from it. According to a 2018 survey, 64% of Americans said they had consumed coffee the previous day, and that's the highest percentage seen since 2012. So what would that mean? I have no idea. Anyway, while we're collectively grinding more beans, brewing more pots, and patronizing our local coffee shops with increased frequency, we might not be maximizing the health and energy-boosting benefits of our daily cup of joe. According to Inc., and that's the Inc, capital I, Inc. I have no idea what Inc is. But anyway, according to Inc., an analysis of 127 scientific studies highlighted the many benefits of drinking coffee, from a longer average lifespan to a reduced risk of cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and Parkinson's. How do you like that? Sounds great, right? The only problem is that the benefits of coffee might be diminished depending on the time of day you drink it. Essentially, it says, science tells us that it's best to drink coffee when your body's cortisol levels are low. And that's because both caffeine and cortisol cause a stress response in your body. Too much stress is bad for your health for obvious reasons. In addition, it might end up making you more tired in the long run. It says, Cortisol, a stress hormone, is released in accordance with your circadian rhythms. This varies from person to person, but in general, someone who wakes up at 6:30 would see their cortisol levels peak in different windows, including 8 to 9 a.m., a couple of hours later, noon to 1 in the afternoon, and 5:30 to 6:30 at night. So someone who rises at 10 a.m., how could you rise at 10 a.m., maybe a split shift or something, or a odd shift, but anyway, someone who rises at 10 a.m. Would experience cortisol spikes roughly 3 hours later, and ultra early risers, can expect to push this schedule 3 hours forward. However, these cortisol levels continue to rise as soon as you start moving in the morning, so it isn't an ideal time to drink coffee. Neither is the afternoon, because doing so could make it more difficult to fall asleep at night. This means that people who wake up at 6:30 should drink coffee after the first cortisol window closes. Make a note of that. Roughly between 9:30 and 11:30 in the morning. Isn't that a little late to have your early coffee? I don't know. So, to put it simply, and who's this? Certified dietitian nutritionist Lisa Lajewski told CNBC, "I would say that mid-morning or early afternoon is probably the best time." As I said, that's pretty late to have coffee, isn't it? Anyway, she says that's when your cortisol levels are the lowest, and you might actually benefit from the stimulant itself. So there you have it. If you have to wait until mid-morning or early afternoon, that's not the way. I don't know. Hey, she's a dietitian. What do I know? Okay, that's that. Now, I normally don't do this day in history. I leave that for the experts, and we have a number of them here. Guests on the Newsmaker program. But I couldn't pass this up. If I mention the name Matthias Rust. Matthias Rust. Anybody have a guess there? Matthias Rust. Well, it was on this day in 1987 that Matthias Rust made history. If you recall, he was a teenager. He was, I believe, 18 years old. And he landed a small, tiny little private plane, a Cessna, near Red Square in Moscow. And I read that on this day in history. I said Matthias Rust landed in Red Square. Actually, he didn't land in Red Square. That's part of the story. But he had a hand. This story got more and more interesting the more I read it. Wow. But this kid, 18 years old, he had a hand in changing history with his kind of wacky, strange flight from... where did he started off in Helsinki. And, okay, he's an amateur aviator, Matthias Rust. Inexperienced. He had about 50 hours flying time at the time of this flight. Now, I don't have a pilot's license, but I don't think 50 hours of flying time is really a whole bunch of flying time, you know. And on May 13th, Rust left his home in Germany. I can't pronounce his hometown, so I don't know. So he leaves his hometown on May 13th, and he rented a Cessna F-172P, okay, which he modified by removing some of the seats and replacing them with fuel tanks. So he had a whole bunch of fuel in his plane. And he flies from his home in Germany, and then he spends the next 2 weeks traveling across Northern Europe. He spent the week in Iceland, and where else? He stayed at a number of places in Northern Europe. Anyway, so he was later quoted as saying that he had the idea of attempting to reach Moscow even before the departure, and he saw the trip to Iceland, which is where he was coming from Germany. He wanted to visit the site of the unsuccessful talks between the United States and the Soviet Union in October of 1986. So he gets this idea. He's in Helsinki now, right? On May 28th, he takes off from Helsinki. He refueled. And he told traffic control there he was going to Stockholm, Sweden. So traffic control says, okay, off you go. And he takes off, and instead of going to Stockholm, he turns east. Now he's heading toward Moscow. So this 18-year-old is flying to Moscow, and now he's in Soviet airspace. So due to a number of mix-ups, I mean, this is Soviet airspace in the late 1980s. These people are serious. They're serious about stuff like this. So he's now in Soviet airspace. And miscommunication, non-communication between the Soviet air defense forces, after all that, he's allowed to just fly right through. One command passes it on to another, and then to another, and they shine it on, and he just keeps going to Moscow, 200 miles through Soviet airspace in a little teeny little plane. And it isn't as if he wasn't spotted. He was spotted, but nobody did anything about it. So he disappears from radar, and they're trying to pick this guy up, and they finally do, and they still do nothing. And he keeps on flying. So around 7 o'clock that night, he appears above the center of Moscow. He had initially intended to land in the Kremlin, but he changed his mind, and he reasoned that landing inside within the Kremlin walls would have allowed the KGB to simply arrest him and deny the incident, and that's probably the last you ever would have heard of Matthias Rust. So therefore, he changed his landing spot to Red Square, or very, very near it. Apparently, there were a lot of people there, so he really couldn't land in the square, but he landed on a bridge by a cathedral. So after taxiing past the cathedral, he stopped about 100 yards from Red Square, where he was greeted by curious passersby and was asked for his autograph. So Rust was arrested 2 hours later. So his trial begins on September 2nd, 1987. He's sentenced to 4 years in a general regime labor camp for hooliganism, disregard of aviation laws, and breaching the Soviet border. He was never transferred to a labor camp and instead served his time at a high-security temporary detention center in Moscow. 2 months later, Reagan and Gorbachev agreed to sign a treaty to eliminate intermediate-range nuclear weapons in Europe, and the Supreme Soviet ordered Rust to be released in August of 1988 as a goodwill gesture to the West. So, William Odom, the former director of the U.S. National Security Agency and the author of The Collapse of the Soviet Military, says that Rust's flight irreparably damaged the reputation of the Soviet military, and this enabled Gorbachev, remember Gorbachev, that's right, to remove many of the strongest opponents to his reforms. The defense minister Sergei Sokolov and the air defense chief Alexander Koltunov were dismissed along with hundreds of other officers over this incident. And this was the biggest turnover in the Soviet military since Stalin's purges 50 years earlier. And this kid did it in a little tiny little rented Cessna. So it's assumed that between this guy totally humiliating the military and Reagan being Reagan, it helped to bring about the end of the Soviet Union. So this kid was instrumental. He humiliated the Russians.
Accidentally.
Well,
accidentally a very important person.
Yeah, I guess. All he wanted to do was test the piloting skills, but why he wanted to test them going to Moscow? That's kind of weird. I mean, he could have been shot down.
He's got a Facebook page, by the way.
Really? Oh, you ought to see the rest of this thing here. This guy's a pretty interesting character. Let me see. While doing obligatory community service in a West German hospital in 1989, because he broke a bunch of laws there, Rust stabbed a female co-worker who had rejected him. So he stabs her, and the victim barely made it. He was convicted of attempted manslaughter, sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, and released after serving 15 months. And since then, it says here, he's lived a fragmented life. Kind of. After being released from court, he converted to Hinduism in 1996 and became engaged to a daughter of an Indian tea merchant. In 2001, he was convicted of stealing a cashmere pullover and ordered to pay a fine of 10,000 DM would be Deutschmark. I wonder how much that is in real money. I have no idea. Anyway, so the fine was reduced to 600 Deutschmarks. A further brush with the law came in 2005 when he was convicted of fraud and had to pay 1,500 euros. Don't they have real money over there? Now he had to pay 1,500 euros, whatever that is, for stolen goods. And in 2009, Roos described himself as a professional poker player. And most recently, in 2012, he now describes himself as an analyst at a Zurich-based investment bank. So this guy's got a pretty interesting life, you know. And maybe he's a little out there, but imagine, an 18-year-old kid having a hand in bringing down the Soviet Union. I think that's an absolutely amazing story. I guess it can't quite by accident, as Brian mentioned, though. Okay, wow. Okay, we're late. We'll be right back. Yep.
New to golf or seasoned veteran, you'll enjoy the casual, relaxed atmosphere of Vanderview Golf Course. 2 miles from downtown Alfred on Waterwells Road, Vanderview is a 9-hole executive-length golf course with a driving range on one side of the road and the course on the other. Family-friendly and fun recreation for everyone. Greens fees are one price for unlimited play, $9.50. High school students, only $5. Children 12 and under with an adult, no charge. You can play up to 18 holes or 9 holes with a cart and get the second 9 holes at no additional charge. Ladies and senior golfers who don't hit the long ball, Vanderview's got the executive length that's just right for your game. And new this year, a season pass for only $100. That's a lot of golfing fun for a very little bit of money. Vanderview Golf Course, 2 miles from downtown Alfred on Waterwells Road. Vanderview Golf Course.
From the Fox Sports Studios in Los Angeles, here's Eddie Garcia.
In the NHL, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals saw the Bruins rally down 2-0 at home to beat the St. Louis Blues 4-2. Sean Kuraly scored the game-winning goal in the third period for Boston as they now extend their postseason win streak to 8 in a row over St. Louis. They dropped to 0-13 all-time in Stanley Cup Final games. Boston with a 1-0 series lead. Game 2 will be Wednesday, again in Boston. NBA Finals will get underway with Game 1 on Thursday in Toronto, with the Raptors hosting the defending champion Golden State Warriors. The Warriors confirming that star Kevin Durant will be out for Game 1 as he continues to recover from that strained calf. There's also a report he's not going to travel to Toronto, which would seem to indicate he'll miss the first 2 games of the NBA Finals. In Major League Baseball games of note, it was a battle of division leaders in Houston, where the leaders of the AL West, the Astros, held off the leaders of the NL Central, the Cubs, for a 6-5 win. The A's extend their winning streak to 10 in a row with an 8-5 win over the Angels.
The Ryan Agencies, your local, independent insurance agencies. The Ryan Agency is not beholden to any one insurance company. They work with many companies, offering unbiased insurance advice. Their interest is seeking your best interest. Contact the Ryan Agencies. Good people offering unbiased advice, seeking your best interest.
Insurance protection you can rely on. The Ryan Agency.
From the Fox Business Network, Sports Illustrated has been sold to Authentic Brands Group, a licensing company, for $110 million. The Wall Street Journal says the seller, magazine publisher Meredith, will continue to publish the print magazine and manage its website for the new owner for at least 2 years. Authentic Brands will collaborate on digital and social strategy. It will obtain Sports Illustrated's photo archive of more than 2 million images, which the buyer says are incredibly valuable to fashion houses as fashion, sports, and music collide. There's another option for lovers of veggie burgers, plant-based Mexican food. Qdoba is launching the Impossible plant-based protein in more than 720 locations in the U.S. today. The markets were closed Monday for the Memorial Day holiday. With the Fox Business Report, I'm Jenny Cosola.
Prescription products require an online physician consultation and are only available if the physician determines a prescription is appropriate. See website for full details.
Hey guys, good news. The expensive little blue pill is now generic, which means you can get the prescription medication to treat ED at affordable prices. And now get your first month's supply for just $5 at 4hims.com/Chris. Hims connects you with real doctors online who can prescribe the medication, and a pharmacy sends it right to your door. So easy. To get your first order for just $5, you need to go to 4hims.com/Chris. That's 4hims.com/Chris.
Today at Simmons Rockwell Ford, receive up to $2,500 in Ford trade assistance with your 99 or newer vehicle trade. Now purchase a new 2019 Ford Escape SE 4x4 equipped with heated power seat, 8-inch touchscreen display, and alloy wheels with Ford trade assistance buy for only $21,999. Shop the Simmons Rockwell Ford dealership near you. Simmons-Rockwell.com.
And we are back. Now, I did just say it was going to be a mishmash this morning, and here was another mish or mash. This is from the New York Times, and the headline is, "It was like a zoo, death on an unruly, overcrowded Everest." Apparently, there was a traffic jam on Mount Everest. I mean, you really wouldn't expect one at 29,000 feet, but this is, where's the, Ed Doring, a doctor from Arizona, had dreamed his whole life of reaching the top of Mount Everest. But when he summited a few days ago, he was shocked by what he saw. Climbers were pushing and shoving to take selfies. The flat part of the summit, which he estimated at about the size of two ping pong tables, was packed with 15 or 20 people. That's a lot of people in a small space. To get up there, he had to wait hours in a line. One puffy jacket after the next on an icy, rocky ridge with a several thousand-foot drop. And doesn't that sound like fun? And he even had to step around the body of a woman who had just died. It was scary, he said, by telephone from Kathmandu, where he was resting in a hotel room. It was like a zoo. This has been one of the deadliest climbing seasons on Everest, with at least 10 deaths. I think now there's been 11. Anyway, and at least some seem to have been avoidable. The problem hasn't been avalanches, blizzards, or high winds. Veteran climbers and industry leaders blame having too many people on the mountain in general and too many inexperienced climbers. Fly-by-night adventure companies are taking up untrained climbers who pose a risk to everybody on the mountain. And the Nepalese government, hungry for every climbing dollar it can get, has issued more permits than Everest can possibly handle safely. And let me see, I think it costs $11,000 to climb Mount Everest. The permit costs $11,000. So apparently everybody's climbing Mount Everest. And I had another story with a photograph of this big long line of people climbing Mount Everest. That's weird. When was Everest first climbed? 1951 or 1952? 1952 by Sir Edmund Hillary. And he was the first person recorded to have done it. Now, like everybody and his brothers, climbing Mount Everest. I mean, there's nothing higher. That's it. I mean, it's either Mount Everest or nothing. I don't know. It's a strange world. Okay, that's it. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8:05. Bye.